The Alleghany Journal has a conversation with Richard Douglas, city manager of Covington, and Mr. Douglas has a draft budget before City Council that involves a fairly substantial tax increase. Mr. Douglas, 8-cent tax increase request is fairly substantial. Can you give the public some of the background on why you believe that's necessary?
Well, first of all, as you said, this is a draft budget. I'm tasked with presenting a balanced budget to the council that I feel provides their best options for moving forward in terms of expenditures and revenues. And in putting this together, there's a lot of decisions that are made. And I want to stress to the public that this recommendation did not come lightly. Hours and hours of thought, discussions with the department heads, with Mr. Bryan, our finance director. I lost a lot of sleep over this budget. But I feel ultimately this was a responsible recommendation to the city council to maintain our level of services as much as we can while providing for these additional needs and trying as best we can to limit the burden on our residents.
And at public meetings, it's not often the case there are many people in the audience. So the public may not be aware that the city faces a number of budget challenges. For example, your share of the jail costs, all kinds of things that are increasing. What are those things, those items that are negatively impacting the city's budget that you think maybe the public should be more aware of? Things like water and sewer costs, all kinds of things.
Okay, well, first of all, the water, wastewater, and sanitation, those are all enterprise funds. Those are separate. We treat those as separate business type operations. So
they stand on their own. The charges for those support those, and that's not involved with this current budget
correct,
request.
and that's part of the discussion with the solid waste increase. That is to support, that provides adequate revenues to support that fund, whereas in the past that was embedded in the general fund. And so those type of operations may or may not support themselves. So we pull those out and making that a standalone fund. So, but we started off this process on the revenue side in a major hole in regards to our Public Service Corporation utility evaluation of property, and we anticipated losing about $220,000 compared to last year on West Rock Boulder railroad property, etc. That is because property values or property sales have exceeded the taxable value, which is a good thing. It tells us properties are selling, and they're selling above what they were taxed a couple years ago.
But it does have a negative revenue effect from the Public Service Corporation.
Correct. The way they assess that is they factor in that sales ratio, and we went from it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 99% last year to 89% this year. So that if we'd have kept the property tax rate the same, real estate tax the same, that would have resulted in a loss of about $220,000. So we started off there in a negative there. Add on to that very minimal growth in our other areas, including all the other things we use as tax revenue: meals tax, lodging tax. Machinery tools had some minimal growth this year, but everything is very stagnant in terms of revenue. So,
and did the automobile industry sales problem in Covington in recent months, did that negatively impact the budget?
I think just minimally, the way those taxes are structured, and the fact that all those taxes go directly to the state, but certainly it had an indirect effect on us in some way. So we had those shortfalls or basically stagnation on the revenue side, and then in addition to that, with expenditures, we had a number of things coming together this year. Of course, the EMS situation has been well documented, and the need to add additional paid staff. So
that's going to end up being about $200,000 for the full year, won't it?
That's an estimate.
Okay.
And as I stressed to council, that number could go up, it could go down, depending on what option is chosen. We're in the process of, while continuing to provide service, evaluate the different ways of providing the service. So what I did for budget purposes was simply extend out the 120-day plan to cover an entire year to make sure we had adequate revenues. And that 120-day plan, as a reminder, is a combination of contracted service, paid staff, and some volunteer participation. So ideally, we have an option where our costs are less, and we still hope to be able to work with the volunteers to be able to increase their number of hours. And anything we do there could get that cost down. But we had to budget responsibly for what that cost may be. So that was a major chunk of the dollars. In addition, Children's Services program, that has historically been underfunded. The council just appropriated $250,000 out of the fund balance this past week.
And that's a requirement.
That is significant. That's a requirement, but it's significant because we're trying to grow and try to at least maintain, if not grow, our fund balance. And we like to limit dipping into that for project costs, matches for grants, and those sort of things. And the Children's Services appropriation this past week is for recurring costs. So historically, we just have not budgeted what we need. So their request through DSS was a 50% increase from approximately $1 million to $1.5 million.
DSS is Department of Social Services.
And it's important to note for those costs, I know we say $1.5 million, 75% of that approximately is reimbursed by the state. So we do get some revenue back, but still a quarter of the $1.5 million is significant. But what I would rather do is give a number to the council that is more reflective of their needs over the whole year, rather than lowballing a number and then having to come back next spring and ask for another $250,000 or more out of the fund reserves. And those costs do continue to go up. There are many challenges there, and of course as staff we're tasked with trying to get those costs down, but it is what it is with that. The other item that's affected the bottom line are the jail service costs. They continue to go up, but also some of the children's services, we, being in the city and the county, because that's a regional joint service, have not accurately budgeted their true costs and needs for a full year, and it's resulted in a shortfall at the end of the year and an additional appropriation of money. So in discussions with the county staff, we feel like we need to have that number be more reflective of the true cost. So again, a big increase in that line item.
Instead of making these adjustments maybe in December or January.
Correct. So we have adequate current year revenue rather than having to tap into reserves to pay for these recurring costs. The last piece that has affected us, like anyone nationwide, is health insurance, and we work really hard to try to get those costs down. We try to offset those cost increases for health insurance by reducing insurance in other areas. It still resulted in about a $100,000 increase year over year. So when we only get about $56,000 for penny of real estate tax, a $100,000 increase in health insurance does have a measurable effect.
We certainly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
And I welcome anybody that has any questions, wants a copy of the budget. I mean, we're trying to be very transparent. You can see line item for line item what we spent last year and the year before and what's proposed this year. And I can assure the public, I know those folks that say, well, we just need to cut. But we tried to maintain as best we can. We had some pretty significant cuts for capital items, equipment, those sort of things. Those needs are well documented, but we trimmed the vast majority of those from the budget, and we have done some reductions in most departments for operating expenses while trying not to cut too deep to where we affect the level of services or have to make some major operational and personnel cuts.
Thanks very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.